Tim and Steve here. In this episode, we're going to talk about the Tom Donahoe era of Steelers football. First of all, let's talk about who Tom Donahoe was. He's a Pittsburgh native. He was the grandson of David L. Lawrence, the former mayor of Pittsburgh and governor of the state of Pennsylvania. He's an IUP graduate. And you would think if he's the general manager of the Steelers, he probably spent years and years in personnel departments around the NFL and working his way up through the system. It's not really the case. He actually spends 16 years coaching high school football and basketball for both Seton LaSalle and Western Allegheny High School.
Well, it's definitely going to prepare you for an NFL GM job. Seton LaSalle's tough.
So it's kind of funny that that's where his career, and 16 years is a long time.
Yeah, it wasn't like he just did that for a couple of years. Yeah.
Right. And what ends up happening is Jack Butler, the Steeler Hall of Famer, was the director of Blesto. And Steve, you know more about this than I do. I believe that was like the original scouting combine.
Yeah, that was the scouting combine that they started between. It's standing for what?
Bears, Lions,
Eagles, Steelers.
Talent organizations.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that's what Blesto stood for.
And it was like these teams pooled their resources to find players.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Jack Butler was the director of that.
Yes.
And he keeps trying to recruit Donahoe to be a scout for Blesto. And I guess Donahoe keeps turning him down, but eventually Donahoe accepts. And he goes to work for Blesto. And from there, the Steelers hire him as their East Talent Scout in 1986. And Donahoe at that point does slowly work his way up the ladder by proving he has an eye for talent. In fact, he's the one who is responsible for drafting linebacker Greg Lloyd in 1987. Lloyd played at Division II Fort Valley State, and he wasn't invited to the combine. And back then, if you played for a small school like that, your games weren't on TV at all, right? There was no widespread cable TV or small school games on TV, and there's no YouTube highlights. So Donahoe has this VHS tape of a Fort Valley State game, which is probably one of...
What's this VHS of which you speak, Tim?
Right. Well, it was this old medium where you could play these tapes that would record things. And, probably one of dozens of tapes that had been sent to NFL teams by lesser known schools like that. So he watches this tape and he's amazed by this linebacker who he says is making every tackle. And he convinces the Steelers to draft Lloyd in the 6th round. And of course, Greg Lloyd will become one of the key pieces on these 90s teams we're about to talk about. So even as a scout, he's starting to impact the roster.
I don't think the 6th round exists anymore, does it?
Yeah, it does. There's still 7 rounds.
Oh, there is. Okay.
But back then, I think there might have been like 12 or something.
Yeah.
So he does that for a few years scouting. And then, it's here's where the history gets a little muddy, because if you look at sites like profootballreference.com, they list Donahoe as the Steelers general manager starting in 1991, but that's not accurate. So first of all, remember the problem here is the Steelers didn't actually have a general manager job title until the year 2011, which was well into Kevin Colbert's tenure. So 2011 is the first time they actually designated somebody as the general manager. What I could find through old newspaper articles is that Donahoe had been promoted from scout to the title of director of pro personnel in 1989. But the people ultimately responsible for the drafts and other player signings at that point are Chuck Noll and Dick Haley. And when Noll retires, Dick Haley leaves. And then in January of 92, Dan Rooney makes 2 big moves. He promotes Donahoe to director of football operations, which is the equivalent of the general manager position. And he hires a new head coach named Bill Cowher. So that's really the start of the Donahoe era, is that act in 92. So let's talk about where the team was positioned when Donahoe took over. And it's not a terrible place, but it's not a great place either. There were definitely some building blocks there, which we'll talk about later. But by and large, the Steelers had this bad trend of not being able to evaluate talent. They had drafted really well in the 70s, and of course, they had built this incredible dynasty, but they couldn't repeat that in the 80s. You had draft picks like Walter Abercrombie and Daryl Sims and John Rienstra and Aaron Jones and who was the guy they drafted instead of Marino Senior Sack? Steve, what was his name? Gabe Rivera.
Yeah. They had Worley. Whoops, Worley.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, just a bunch of bad draft picks.
Did
And
they draft Brister? They probably did.
they did. He wasn't a high pick though, like the rest of those guys. But yes, they still drafted him. After
To their credit, they drafted Neil O'Donnell too. So
they did, and yeah, we'll kind of get to that. They it wasn't all bad. Like it wasn't like Donahoe was taking over a 1-15 team or something like that. But what had happened in the 80s was personnel director Art Rooney Jr. had clashed with Chuck Noll on draft decisions. And so Dan Rooney makes the tough decision to fire his brother. But even after that, the team still doesn't do well in the personnel department. And it all really kind of comes to a head in Chuck Noll's last year, 1991, because that year the Steelers have the 15th pick in the draft. They're reportedly targeting 3 players, and all 3 of those players immediately get selected right before the Steelers pick. So they have number 15, and apparently like 12, 13, and 14 were the 3 guys that they wanted. And so they panic, apparently, and this is, again, all reportedly. It's not like anybody would ever come out on record and say that. But apparently what they do is panic, and they select linebacker Huey Richardson from Florida.
Huey Lewis.
And he ends up being arguably the worst number 1 draft pick in Steeler history. He only plays in 5 games. And then Cowher and Donahoe make the rather bold decision to cut him in training camp before his second season. I mean, to cut last year's number 1 draft pick, that's huge.
It's almost like trading away.
Well, I was just
after 2 years.
I was just going to say, it's like I said, you're going to see some parallels here with, and that's very similar to what just happened with Kenny Pickett at the time of this recording.
I think there's a lot of that's not my guy. So like that happens with entrenched people. It's like, oh, I got to prove myself right, so I'm going to hang on to this guy.
Yes,
stuff that goes on.
Yep. Donahoe. So Omar Khan didn't draft Kenny Pickett. Donahoe didn't draft Huey Richardson. So it's easier to let go of that because, like you said, it's not on me.
You're not admitting a mistake.
Right. Exactly. So, at the time Donahoe and Cowher are hired, I think fans were certainly, well, I would say like cautiously optimistic that maybe we'll turn this around, right? Because there's some new blood in here. Maybe we won't keep making the same terrible draft picks.
Well, between Dan's brother and Dick Haley, it was pretty bad.
It was. And so Donahoe comes in, immediately makes an impression with his very first draft in 1992. Listen to this draft, Steve. 92. First round, Leon Searcy, tackle from Miami. Second round, Levon Kirkland, linebacker from Clemson. Third round, Joel Steed, nose tackle from Colorado. And then way down in the 8th round, which is a round that doesn't exist anymore, Darren Perry, defensive back from Penn State. So Leon Searcy becomes one of the better right tackles in football. And then the 3 defensive players all become starters for really the remainder of the decade. And 2 of them, Kirkland and Steed, are Pro Bowlers. And Darren Perry was never a Pro Bowler, but he was a very good safety.
Yeah, he was good. Yeah.
So right away, Donahoe's gotten 4 huge pieces in his very first draft. And then later that year, Donahoe signs a guy who had been a draft choice of the San Diego Chargers a year earlier, but he'd been waived at the end of training camp. It's wide receiver Yancey Thigpen, who goes on to become the best Steelers receiver of the era and a multiple-time Pro Bowler. And
he was good every other year. An odd number of years. You wanted Yancey Thigpen in like 97 and 96 and 95 and 97. And then,
right.
And then he even did that when he went to Tennessee. He did the same thing. Like his feet, he always said his feet were messed up. He did not have a great set of feet, and that's what would hurt him.
Yeah, and it was all injuries. It wasn't like he stunk in those even number of years.
It was always something with his feet. Like there was just something, I don't know if like he just, genetically or what, but he always seemed like he always had like an ankle or a toe, or there was just something weird. Maybe he was wearing the wrong shoes. Who knows?
And I think because of that, we tend to forget how elite Yancey Thigpen was, because when he was in those odd numbered years like you
Yeah.
talked about, he's right up there with the best receivers of the era: Chris Carter, Jerry Rice, Tim Brown. I mean, he's not a Hall of Famer like those guys because, again, he couldn't sustain that success. But in that vacuum of just that 1 or 2 years, he was he was as good as any of those guys. He
The
really
best
was.
quarterback he played with was McNair.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the other thing. Uh he didn't have Steve Young throwing to him
Yeah.
or any of those other guys. So uh but hey, I mean, how about that for a debut for Tom Donahoe? And that first Donahoe Cowher team wins the AFC Central. And to be fair, those 4 draft picks and Yancey Thigpen, that didn't win them the division. What everybody forgets, and what I kind of alluded to earlier, is that the Steelers actually had a semi okay team before Cowher and Donahoe came in. Chuck Noll's final 3 seasons were 9-7 make the playoffs, 9-7 just barely missed the playoffs, and then 7-9. So they weren't a bad team. Again, they weren't like a 4-12 or 3-13. They were just a team who couldn't quite get over the hump. And they already had some key pieces like Rod Woodson, Carnell Lake, Eric Green, Barry Foster.
I think a
Steve mentioned
1,200
Neil
yard
O'Donnell.
rusher sit the bench is probably a poor decision.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So not necessarily the best use of talent, but they had those guys. All those guys were drafted prior to Donahoe being the general manager. Although, as we said, Donahoe was involved in drafting those guys as well, just not the guy leading the
Well, if
charge.
you remember too, Chuck Noll at the end there retired. He said, "I just can't coach these guys anymore." And yeah, so I think there was some of that. Like, he just couldn't relate to whatever was going on in the locker room.
Yeah, yeah. And Cowher comes in and does a good job coaching, and Donahoe again comes in and starts making these great additions. And going into the next season, 1993, the Steelers had this young, promising team. Donahoe's looking to build on it. One huge area of need going into that year's draft was at the cornerback position. And there's something that happens in the 1992 playoffs that really highlights a glaring weakness there, Steve. I know you remember what that was.
3rd and Sammy.
Yeah, it was Rod Woodson. Rod Woodson and DJ Johnson are the starters, but they don't really have any depth. And Woodson, did he get hurt in that playoff game?
Yes, he broke his hand, I do believe.
Yeah, and that killed them. They were playing against the high flying Buffalo Bills of that era.
Who had come back the week before from the largest deficit
Yeah.
in NFL history.
Yeah, so you weren't going to cover Andre Reed and James Lofton and company with their other
Sammy Walker.
Sammy Walker was a guy they had drafted in 91. He was legally blind in one eye, and he just
what was Dick Haley doing?
And he just
you can kind of see. You don't have to see to cover people.
It didn't
just
go
feel
well.
them. Just feel them out. Feel them out. I shouldn't make fun of somebody's disability, but at the same time, my God.
They had also signed Richard.
That's not even on Sammy. Like, why? Why would you put a poor dude in that position?
They had also signed Richard Shelton, who, as we talked about in our
he wasn't
Players
terrible
episode, but he wasn't. He
was like a solid player. He wasn't. Yeah, he wasn't a superstar.
Yeah,
he was like a Chris Oldham, like a Nickelback. Yeah,
yeah. They just didn't have good depth. And that year, 93, DJ Johnson, he's in the final year of his contract, so the Steelers needed a cornerback, and that's what they took in the first round from Colorado. They took Deon Figures, and Deon Figures does not become, unfortunately, a great cornerback, but ironically, way down in the 6th round, the cornerback that they get from Western Carolina does become a really good player for the Steelers, Willie Williams. So they get him in the 6th round, and then in the 2nd round, they draft a teammate of Deon Figures, who does become a star. That's linebacker Chad Brown, who becomes
he's
really
very good. Yeah, very good. Yeah.
The 3rd and 4th rounds net wide receiver Andre Hastings and defensive lineman Kevin Henry, both very serviceable players.
Yeah, pretty good. Yeah.
So
Battle of Hastings. I just remember that from Chris Berman.
Chris Berman,
yeah.
Yeah. So let's go back just for a minute, talk about the linebacking unit, because remember, the Steelers played this 3-4, which was rare. Most teams played a 4-3 at that point. And Donahoe's first 2 drafts net 2 inside linebackers, Chad Brown and Levon Kirkland. And then Donahoe had signed Kevin Green as a free agent that year. So you pair those three guys with Greg Lloyd, the guy that Donahoe had found toiling in obscurity back in 1987. And that's really what makes the core of that Steelers defense was those linebackers. And the Steelers do make the playoffs again in 93, although as we detailed in our roller coaster Steeler episode, it's a rather uneven season. They fail to win a playoff game, but by 1994, they're ready to take the next step. In that draft, Donahoe takes two players on offense with his first four picks in the first round. They take another guy from Colorado. I don't know what it was with Colorado back then. They just
Yeah,
were
they did pick
obsessed.
a lot of Colorado players. Yeah.
Yeah, they take wide receiver Charles Johnson, who had one really good year, but he had a lot of injury problems also. So he was decent, but not great. Sadly, also no longer with us. He committed suicide in 2022. And in the third round, they get running back Bam Morris, who becomes a huge part of the offense for the next couple of seasons.
Bam likes to cultivate things. Yes, he's cultivating some yards there.
Yep.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that later too. They continue to stock up defensively as well. They get Brenson Buckner in the second round. He's a defensive tackle.
He was pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah, solid starter. And then they had two third round picks. I also get Jason Gilden, a linebacker in the third round.
Wow, that guy, that's a steal. Yeah.
Yeah. Who has to wait a while to break into that already stout starting linebacking core we talked about. But when he does, he becomes the franchise's all-time sack leader.
Yeah.
And then just for good measure, in the fifth round, they get Myron Bell, another guy, safety, that ends up being a starter.
He wasn't bad, but he wasn't quite good enough. He was like a good NFL player, but yeah, he wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, he ends up being a starter. So for a fifth round pick, you can't complain about
that.
Yeah. So again, you can just kind of see this progression of pieces being put into place. One little piece at a time. Some guys are stars, some guys are just starters and serviceable, but it all kind of adds up. And the 1994 season produces arguably the best defense I think the Steelers have had since the 70s. Remember that Blitzburg defense in 94 was so good.
Yeah, it was.
And I just don't think it's been as good since. I really don't. I think that was the best defense.
2008, that was pretty good defense.
It was good. Yeah, it was very good. I just think 94 was better. I really do.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
LaMarr Woodley and James Harrison? I don't know, man. That was
Greg Lloyd and Kevin Green.
I think Woodley and Harrison were better.
What about you didn't have a Rod Woodson in 2008? You know?
Well, yeah, I mean, Ike Taylor is criminally underrated, but he's not Rod Woodson. But
yeah,
neither is Deion Sanders. So go figure, right?
Yeah, it's a good argument. Let's just say both were very good, and 94 definitely a great defense. The problem in 94
safety though is where it really. I mean, Troy Polamalu is way better than Myron Bell. It's not even close.
Well, Carnell Lake though.
I mean, yeah, but and then who was the other one? Darren Perry.
Yeah, it wouldn't have been Myron Bell at that point. It would have been Lake and Perry and Troy and Ryan Clark. So
Ryan Clark's better than Darren Perry.
Again, you could go up and down. I will agree to disagree with you on this one. I think 94 they had a better. I think they won games with their.
Come on, Aaron Smith over Joel Steed or whoever else was at that. Yeah, I don't know.
So really the problem in 94 was that the offense.
Well, yeah,
wasn't as good.
Stunk. They didn't have Ben Roethlisberger. You put Ben Roethlisberger in the 94 team. He got something. Yeah.
And what
unfortunately Ben Roethlisberger was like 5 years old.
Yeah, he probably wouldn't have been so good at that point.
Yeah.
The what happens that you know, it's funny that you brought up 2008 because a very similar thing happened in 2008. What happens is they get into the AFC Championship game against San Diego and the defense falters. The defense gives up a huge play late in the game to Tony Martin, just like the defense gave up a huge play late in the game to Larry Fitzgerald. But in 1994, like you said, without a guy like Ben, the offense is unable to bring the team back. And the Steelers.
Ben Roethlisberger would have been 12 years old in 1994.
So. Okay. Well, maybe he could have won that game.
Yeah. Instead of Neil. Yeah.
So that's a disappointing end of that season. And when they go into 1995, Donahoe is committed to, hey, the defense is in a good spot. We've got to improve the offense. And the 1995 draft the first 3 picks are all offensive players, which is rare for the Steelers. So in the first round, they take tight end Mark Bruner. In the
That's a
second
good pick.
round,
Yeah, that's good.
they take quarterback Cordell Stewart.
I wonder how that's going to pan out.
In the third round, they take guard Brendan Sty.
Yeah.
And all 3 of those guys.
Brendan Sty. So yeah, it's Strelzik who's Sty's still alive.
Yeah. And Bruner and Sty become immediate starters, and
they have very solid careers, like not Hall of Famers, but very solid. NFL
very
players.
solid,
like a
absolutely.
Darren Perry, like a Myron Bell. Like, yeah.
Well, and remember, Steve, when we did the episode on Kevin Colbert, when we went through those drafts, we saw guys like Chris Hope. Remember, like there was all these like pieces. Like Chris Hope was never a superstar. Chris Hope was never in the Pro Bowl. But man, he was key to them making and winning the Super Bowl when you combine him with all the other guys that they had picked. And that's kind of like Mark Bruner and Brendan Sty. And then Cordell, well,
he was the wild card. He was definitely the you didn't really know what you were getting with him. Yeah.
Yeah, and you forget how integral he was that rookie year to the Steelers because they were using him in that slash role.
Well, when they added him to Ernie Mills and Andre Hastings and Yancey Thigpen, that was hard to cover.
Yeah. And when the defense falters against Indianapolis in the AFC Championship game, just like they had faltered in the championship game the year before, this time the offense is able to bring them back. And the Steelers, after just 4 years of this new Donahoe Cowher regime, are going to the Super Bowl.
Ernie Mills, still one of my favorite wide receivers of the Steelers.
Yeah, he was pre Donahoe. I should have mentioned him in the list of guys that were kind of already there, but he was another kind of key guy.
He had a good career after he made a Pro Bowl with Carolina and Dallas, I think. After he left. Yeah.
And Cordell, I watched recently like an NFL Films thing on that 95 championship game. There was a drive, I think it was the Steelers touchdown drive in the first half where they had like 3 third downs and Cordell converted all 3. And one or two of them were like on an option where they like put him under center. One was like on a pass. It just, if you look at his stats from that year, he didn't play a whole ton. He was kind of like an X factor guy, but man, there were so many big plays he made.
He caught a touchdown before the half too.
Yes.
That maybe was not a touchdown, but
yes. But he did,
it's a touchdown. It counts.
So yeah, just at this point, it's really, that's the height of the Donahoe era, 1995. He's widely viewed as one of the best, if not the best general manager in football. What he's been able to do in only 4 years is amazing. And if you look at the 11 defensive starters for Super Bowl 30, because again, even though the offense was improved, the defense is still the heart and soul of the team. If you look at the 11 starters, Carnell Lake is a holdover from the Knoll regime. The rest of the guys were people that Donahoe brought in. Greg Lloyd, who, as we said, Donahoe was responsible for drafting.
I guess Rod Woodson.
He was the general manager.
Yeah.
Ray Seals and Kevin Green, who Donahoe had brought in as free agents. And then the rest of the guys are Donahoe draft picks from the last 4 years. Buckner, Steed, Kirkland, Chad Brown, Willie Williams, Boo Bell, Darren Perry. So that's again, Donahoe has his fingerprints over all of that. And then you add that to the pieces that Donahoe had brought in on offense. And the 95 team is the single most complete team that the Steelers have had since the 1970s. And now they're playing in the Super Bowl against the Dallas Cowboys. Wow. Just wow. There are only bright days ahead, right, Steve?
you would have hoped. And I don't see like his moves. Like, I know you're going to like start to say his moves but he makes another move that's pretty good. I know that's coming up. It wasn't like it all fell off in 1 year. So
well, let's before we get to that, let's talk about again just the excitement of being in Super Bowl 30 and what happens next.
Seven defensive backs. Blitz on. O'Donnell. Intercepted and hold the ground. Has a shot at a touchdown. Brown knocked out of bounds by John L. Williams. And Brown again, not even near the play. The ball thrown right to him.
And you forgot about the key John L. Williams signing from Seattle.
Yeah, because who would have been there to push Larry Brown out of bounds at the 3-yard line if John L. Williams wouldn't have been there?
He wasn't bad. He was just like a veteran at the
He
end of his
was.
career.
He was.
He had a really good career.
He did.
Yeah.
So that game, Super Bowl 30, it's a crossroads for that 90s era Steelers, especially for the offense, which had finally just come into its own. Because that offseason, they lose their starting quarterback, O'Donnell. They lose their starting running back, Bam Morris, and their starting right tackle, Leon Searcy. Then on defense, they lose Hall of Famer Kevin Green. And Morris, as Steve kind of alluded to earlier, was arrested on cocaine charges. But O'Donnell, Green, and Searcy were big money free agent defections. And this really starts a pattern under Donahoe where the Steelers draft or sign a player, work really hard to develop him, integrate him into the scheme, and then lose him once his first contract is up. And that's something that you didn't really ever see happen during the Kevin Colbert era. I mean, the Steelers were consistently able to lock up their core players like Ben and Hines Ward, Troy, Harrison, Ferrier, Hampton.
I think it was a little more clear cut with some of those guys though. Like definitely like Ben and Troy are like no brainers. Like O'Donnell, he was okay. I mean, I don't think anybody's going to say Neil O'Donnell is going to go to the Hall of Fame if he stays here. I mean, do they maybe make another Super Bowl if he stays here? I mean, then they use up all their money, and who can they,
Yeah, yeah, those decisions aren't easy for sure. And you're right. Like Ben is a no-brainer, Troy's a no-brainer. But what about, when they re-signed Ike Taylor or when they re-signed?
Well, that's when I thought it started
Aaron
to get
Smith.
a little. They went on the little other side of that. And I remember Dan Rooney at the time even saying that like, unless we find like, oil or something on the north side, we're gonna have trouble paying all these people. So
yeah, but that was, again, it was just a different mentality. And in the 90s, it was just kind of like, well, this guy's going to be a free agent, nothing we can do but watch him go.
It was very baseball like I felt like it was the same thing that happened to the Pirates was happening to the Steelers. I remember at the time. Yeah. Especially when O'Donnell left. Like, not that Neil O'Donnell and Barry Bonds have anything in common except for they're both professional athletes, but I mean, I don't know. It just had that feel to it.
And in Donahoe's defense, the salary cap was a very new thing at this point. I think they had instituted that in 91, 92. It was right around the time Donahoe got hired. And it was a little bit of Wild West. And you did see other good teams lose key players. And you definitely saw teams like way overpaying for free agents.
Like some team in the nation's capital.
Yeah, exactly. Good example.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was like the Steelers lost everyone. And I remember at the time, like trying to rationalize it. And I remember thinking, well, like very few of the guys we lost had the same success elsewhere. I mean, O'Donnell was stunk on the Jets. He was a huge bust. Yancey Thigpen, like you said, got injured a lot when he went to the Titans.
But he did have a couple good years. Chad Brown was probably the guy that had the most success that left.
Yeah. But a lot of other guys didn't. I mean, Ray Seals was a good example. He had double-digit sacks for Pittsburgh.
Did nothing, yeah.
Did nothing in Carolina. But see, so that was my justification at the time. But looking back on it, that didn't really matter because it still made our team worse.
Yeah, football's kind of funny like that. There's guys that fit in perfectly on one team with one coach, and then when they go somewhere else, they don't fit in. And it is kind of like different. Like, I don't know if the other coaching staffs just know how to use them or they just don't quite fit in their scheme, or I've seen that happen. Yeah. I mean, now if you got a great player like Aaron Donald or, Joe Montana, it doesn't matter. You'll put them anywhere and they'll be fine. But it seems like with some of the other players, it does.
Yeah, and O'Donnell's a good example, like you said. That's hard because he's not Joe Montana, but you just got to a Super Bowl with him,
and he's like a mediocre quarterback. And like that was when it was transitioning. Like he reminds me of like a Mark Rippon or like who was the other guy for Washington that won? Hostetler or somebody like that. Like,
yeah.
The Hostetler was with the Giants, right? Yeah. I mean, he was just kind of like that guy. Like he wasn't a great quarterback, but he wasn't a bad quarterback.
Yeah. So tough decisions for sure. Easy to play Monday morning quarterback on that, but it was just, And if it was just O'Donnell, that's one thing. But it's like they lost every time there was a free agent. It's like, okay, that guy's gone.
I
That
think
guy's gone.
losing who was the tackle, then they lose Searcy.
Yeah, was that same offseason they lost Searcy.
Yeah.
We're actually going to talk about that because
That was a tough one. Yeah.
that was a really tough one. So we'll actually get into that. Also at this time, there's a rift starting to develop between Donahoe and Cower. And no one really knows when it starts. Like those two guys haven't written tell-all books or anything like that. Ed Bouchette, who covered the Steelers for decades and probably has the most inside Steeler information of any Steeler media person, he says things were good for about 2 years, but then started like very slowly deteriorating. So we head into the 1996 draft with a boatload of missing pieces because, like we said, Searcy, Bam Morris, Neil O'Donnell, Kevin Green, all gone. How will Donahoe address this? Well, the big thing he does on draft day is swing a trade with the Rams for a supposedly washed up running back named Jerome Bettis. And that's obviously,
this is a great trade. It's one of the best moves.
Historic.
I mean, it's probably one of the best like signings by the Steelers of a free agent outside of James Ferrier.
Oh, it was a trade. It was a trade.
Oh, that's right. Trade. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I agree. I mean, it was huge. And it's a good thing because the rest of the 1996 draft is hot garbage.
And is this the Jermaine Stevens draft?
Yeah. So
yeah. Oh man.
So losing Leon Searcy, like we said, that may have hurt more than any other free agency defection during this decade, because the Steelers will spend the rest of the decade wandering in the right tackle wilderness. And the first thing they try to do to address it is they draft this kid, Jermaine Stevens, out of North Carolina A&T. And my God, is he bad. He was supposed to be a bit of a project, which was okay because they had that Justin Strelzik, who was kind of like their jack of all trades offensive lineman, who could kind of keep the seat warm for maybe half a season until Jermaine Stevens was ready, but he never was ready. And Stevens ultimately gets cut on the first day of camp a few years later when he shows up so out of shape that he cannot complete a running drill that the other 79 players in camp all complete with ease. And that's the end of Jermaine Stevens. And the rest of the draft, like we said, hot garbage. The second pick doesn't come into the third round because of the Bettis trade. They take inside linebacker Stephen Conley. He never starts. He was
awesome.
Yeah, he never starts a single NFL game. But just for fun, two inside linebackers that were still on the board at the time. You have Hall of Famer and 5-time All-Pro Zach Thomas was on the board. And then you have one of Steve's favorite all-time players, 3-time Super Bowl champion Teddy Bruschi, also on the board when they took Stephen Conley. And I know you hate Teddy Bruschi, but I still would have taken him over Stephen Conley.
Well, maybe I would have liked him then. I don't know.
So
I just remember him jumping on like that running back from Carolina's head that one time. It was like in the Super Bowl and nothing being called. I was like, oh, okay. Guess you're allowed to do that now.
Steve's a huge Patriots fan, by the way. Loves the Patriots, thinks they're the greatest. The Steelers win the division in 1996, even though they had lost a bunch of players. And that was, we did a whole episode on that season as well. And they kind of, unfortunately, limp into the postseason. And they lose in the Fog Bowl game in the playoffs in Foxborough to the aforementioned New England Patriots. And the day after the game, two reporters approached Tom Donahoe asking about the game. And he makes this quote. He says, it was a very disappointing game. Obviously, it's probably not reflective of the team we have. For whatever reasons, we didn't play very well. We were flat. End quote. And that causes a big stir. When Cower hears about that, he's furious. The next day at a news conference, someone asked Cower about it, and he very tersely says something to the effect of, I don't know, ask Tom.
Tears? Was he tears?
It was terse.
Cower used to say tears.
Yeah, right. So that kind of seems to be the first public display of there being a rift. And again, nobody really knows how bad this rift is at the time, but you can tell that Cower's angry and the Donahoe said they were flat because they got blown out in that Fog Bowl game.
Yeah, it wasn't even a game. Like the second play of the game, Curtis Martin goes for like 60 yards or something.
Yeah, it was bad. So the Steelers, a little bit of a step backwards. And now this is where they really need to restock, right? Because they've committed to the strategy of letting everybody walk in free agency. So they have to replace those guys in the draft. And like we said, 1996, the Bettis trade was amazing, but it's a terrible start otherwise. And then guess what? 1997, not a whole lot better. In that draft, in the first round, they take Chad Scott, cornerback out of Maryland.
Oh, he
And
was amazing.
well, okay.
He was mediocre.
Yeah, I know we all
mediocre to
hate,
poor.
yeah, I know we all hate Chad Scott. I don't think he was as terrible as we all remember. He just wasn't a first round caliber star,
Yeah.
right? If he was a fifth round pick, we all wouldn't, I don't think would have hated him as much. He's somewhat serviceable, but yes, it's definitely not great. And then in the second round, they take wide receiver Will Blackwell. That's a complete bust.
Isn't he the one that got hurt in the football game on the beach? Or,
Maybe I don't
I-
remember that.
or maybe it was Blackman. I don't know. Blackman. I don't know. But I remember there was a wide receiver the Steelers had that had like a pretty decent like rookie year, and then he got hurt in like the rookies game they played like a game on the beach, and it was like, oh, that's the end of his career.
Well, it wasn't Will Blackwell because he did not have a good rookie year or second year or third
Yeah,
year.
like, yeah, okay.
Yeah. So that's a second round pick. In the third round, probably realizing even at this point that Jermaine Stevens wasn't going to work out, the Steelers take tackle Paul Wiggins, who appears in a grand total of one game
Wow.
for the Steelers as a rookie. And then the next year gets suspended for using Andrew. And do you know the reason he took Andrew, Steve?
I don't know. He wanted
Because it's
stay in the NFL.
1998 and he sees this guy named Mark McGuire who takes Andrew hitting 70 home runs. And he's like, hey,
I
if
can hit
help
home
him hit
runs.
singers, I bet it can help me block Ray Lewis. And he's shocked to learn that the NFL has banned Andrew and he's in violation of the rules. He says, quote, it's unfair that he's a professional athlete and I am too, and he can take it and I can't.
Well, you see, you play football and he plays baseball, and I don't know what to tell you. Different leagues have different rules. Maybe you should look into that before just taking stuff.
Well, he gets waived a few weeks later, so that doesn't work out. And probably that 97 draft, the best pick that they had was Mike Vrabel, but not for us.
That works out well for us.
It works out well for the Patriots. So that's two bad drafts in a row, and the free agents keep leaving. That being said, in 1997, the Steelers still have many of those key pieces from earlier in the decade. They're also banking on young quarterback Cordell Stewart to be their new starting quarterback rather than just Slash. And boy, what a season Cordell has in 1997. We talked about that in our Cordell episode that we did. He lights up the NFL. He takes the Steelers all the way to the AFC Championship game. And this is really kind of like the last gasp for the 1990s because after this, the years of free agent losses and bad drafts really start catching up after the Steelers lose that 97 championship game to Denver. In 1998, Donahoe does hit probably, I would say, the biggest home run of his career with the first round pick. He takes Alan Faneca, the guard out of LSU, ends up being a Hall of Famer, key to winning the Steelers winning a Super Bowl years later. And two other guys that go in that draft are also keys to later Super Bowls, Hines Ward and Deshae Townsend.
Yeah, they were the only guys from that draft that survived to the Super Bowl team. Fun fact.
Yeah, so those were really good picks. The problem is that like Hines Ward and Deshae Townsend, they're later round draft picks, and the guys that are supposed to be like the help us now picks, like the second and third round picks, are busts. They take Jeremy Statt in the second round as defensive end, and Chris Conrad, another tackle, in the third round. And again, Chris Conrad is a right tackle. Guess how many games he starts? Paul Wiggins started one. Guess how many Chris Conrad starts?
Zero. Wow.
1998 marks.
Boy, they just couldn't find a tag. Whoever was like scouting the offensive line should have been fired.
Yeah, that's like we said. This is losing Leon Searcy was so killer because it was just one bad right tackle pick after another. And like we said, this is when it starts to catch up because 1998 marks the first Steeler team under Cowher to miss the playoffs. And it's quite the spectacular fall. That team is 7-4 on Thanksgiving Day, loses to the Lions on the dumbest controversy in the history of sports.
It
and
was
then doesn't
head
win a
sales.
game for the rest of the season.
Yeah.
So the other thing that happens is the Cordell badly regresses, culminating in the
The
infamous
benching in Tampa. Yeah.
Yep, crying on the sideline incident in Tampa that we talked about in our Cordell episode. So now it's like another crossroads, because on one hand, this looks like a team that has a lot of holes. On the other hand, if Phil Lockett doesn't botch that coin toss, maybe we're in the playoffs that year. I mean, right? You could look at it that way. So going into 1999, the Steelers really need Tannehill to work his magic again, because it's been a couple years in a row. Things are starting to fall off. And one of the most barren positions on the team at this point was wide receiver. Steve, here's a good trivia question. Who was the Steelers' top receiver in 1998?
98.
Yeah, and I'll give you a hint. Gone are Yancey Thigpen, Ernie Mills, Andre Hastings, and Charles Johnson. Have all left via free agency.
Wow. In 1998, Bobby Wagner. I don't know.
The linebacker for Seattle. Wow,
I don't know. I don't know.
It's Courtney Hawkins.
Oh yeah, that guy.
The immortal Courtney Hawkins. And so again, like we said, Thigpen, Mills, Hastings, CJ.
Wow.
Those guys are all gone, and Donahoe has drafted the likes of Will Blackwell and Jaheen Arnold, and those guys aren't working out. And he's signing, guys like Courtney Hawkins. It's just not the same as it was.
I forgot about Jaheen Arnold. Yeah, that guy sucked too.
Yeah. He was like one of those guys that was really good in training camp and never really could translate that into the regular season. I think also he got injured one time, unfortunately. I think he took a shot from Lee Flowers in like a practice. And that sidelined him for a while. So he had some bad luck. But yeah, just point is, none of these things were working out. And so Donahoe is determined in this 99 draft to get a receiver in the first round. And he has one of his highest picks that he's ever had, number 13, because again, that was the first time the Steelers had missed the playoffs. So he has a high pick. And lucky for Tom Donahoe, there are two stud wide receivers in this draft. Torrey Holt from NC State and David Boston from Ohio State. But not so lucky for Donahoe, both of those guys get drafted before number 13. So at this point, Bill Cowher says, you know what? Okay, those wide receivers are off the board. We've got to draft Javon Curse, who is this guy from Florida, who was this defender that was so freakishly talented that his nickname was literally the Freak. And that's who Cowher wants to draft. But Donahoe says, no, we have to take a receiver, hell or high water. So he gambles the pick.
Troy Edwards.
Yeah, on a 5'10" wide receiver named Troy Edwards. It's a huge mistake. Curse becomes the defensive rookie of the year and helps lead the Titans to the Super Bowl. Well, Troy Edwards pretty much does nothing for the next 3 years, except he does make that really costly error in the 2001 AFC Championship game. So there's that.
He's got that going for him.
But hey, that's okay. That's the first round. What about the second round? Well, guess who else the Steelers had lost that offseason to free agency? All-time great safety, Carnell Lake.
So is this the infamous Scott Shields pick?
It's Scott Shields.
Scott Shields was always kind of an enigma to me. He wasn't slow, but he wasn't fast. It was weird. Yeah. It's like he could run fast, but just it took him like 10 steps to get up to full speed, which is a problem in football.
Yep. So that doesn't work out. Okay. So that's the second round. Okay. Now in the third round, time to once again attempt to address that right tackle position. And remember, Donahoe has drafted a right tackle in the first 3 rounds for 3 straight years, and he's 0 for 3. So it's time to stop messing around, right? Time to swing for the fences. Steve, have you ever heard of the Outland Trophy?
Oh, this guy. He's horrible. This is the guy from UCLA, isn't it?
Yeah, but do you know what that trophy is? It is the guy from UCLA.
It's the best offensive lineman in college football.
Actually, I thought that too. But I was wrong. It's the best lineman.
Oh, so he could be defensive.
Yeah.
Did Aaron Donald win? I think he did win that.
I think he may have. Yeah. But yeah, it's the best lineman, period. And who wins the Outland Trophy in 1998? It's a tackle from UCLA named Chris Ferris.
Oh, that guy. Ooh, that was
and the
bad.
Steelers take him. Finally, Steve. Our issues at right tackle are solved.
Yes,
right?
who could forget the immortal Chris Ferris? Yes.
And Chris
I'd
Ferris,
rather taken Dion Ferris, the singer.
arguably Chris Ferris is arguably a bigger bust than any of those other three guys because at least Jermaine Stevens, Paul Wiggins, and Chris Conrad saw the field. Ferris never even once suits up for a live game.
Yikes.
He never even gets a uniform on.
Do you think this started to become a thing between Cower and Donahoe at that point? I mean, I guess it's not like these guys got cut and went somewhere else and had a lot of success, so maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean that's the hard thing to determine all this. Like we said, obviously there was a rift, and when did it start and when did it escalate? Obviously that Fog Bowl game, you could see a little bit of public display of it, but you didn't really see that. How are you know you're not there in the draft room. You're not there talking when they're talking about personnel decisions and everything's going to be media faced, except for that one thing with the playoff game in New England. Everything that's going to be in front of the media is going to be, hey, we're all on the same team and we're coming out, supporting each other. So I don't know. That's a great question that I don't know that we'll ever know the answer to. But man, this whole thing with the right tackle, that was just disastrous. And that didn't help. Cordell, like we said, Cordell had regressed, and not giving him a right tackle and just going through one after another. Steve, I'll give you $100 right here on the spot if you can tell me who ends up being the starting right tackle for the 1999 Steelers.
What the heck? I'm not that good.
Anthony Brown.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
I'd have to Google him to even know if is he still in football? Did he have a career?
I think he might have been a free agent that they signed from. I want to say like Cincinnati or something. But I mean, they had drafted 4 right tackles in the previous 4 years in those top 3, like those day one, what would be called today day 1 or day 2 picks, and none of those guys worked out. None of those guys are starting. Like
that's going to be a problem.
You think at least one of the 4 of them would have been good enough to start? Nope. They're all complete busts. Now, so those are your 3 picks. You're Troy Edwards, Scott Fields, Chris Ferris. To be fair, that draft isn't a total loss because the Steelers do get 2 guys later by the names of Joey Porter and Aaron Smith, you may have heard of. And you could also argue, like, if they drafted Javon Kearse, would they have taken Joey Porter? Right, because they probably wouldn't have. And Javon Kearse, as good as he was that first couple of years, he couldn't really sustain that. So
he got hurt in that.
Yeah. So maybe it all worked out for the better. But in 1999, when they really desperately needed to improve, they don't do it at all. And not surprisingly, that season, the Steelers are terrible. At the time of this recording, the 1999 season is still the worst season of either the Cower or Tomlin eras.
Did they have, what'd they have? 6 wins, 5
wins? 6, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah. But they were 5-3, and then they lost almost every game except one. So it was quite a collapse. And at the end of that season, things do come to a head between Cower and Donahoe. In Dan Rooney's autobiography, he says that Cower had barred Donahoe from attending coaching meetings because he thought he was a spy and he thought Donahoe was sabotaging him. Donahoe thinks that he had given Cower talent, but he couldn't coach them up. So maybe Donahoe thinks, hey, these right tackles is not their fault. It's Cower can't coach them. There's reportedly like zero trust between the 2 guys. That 1999 season ends with a very ugly home loss to the Titans that Steve and I attended together and sat through miserably. After that game, Cower goes in front of the media and he states that boldly that there will be no coaching changes on his staff. And everybody kind of saw that at the time as like a direct middle finger to Mr. Rooney. And a lot of people just expected an announcement that Cower was going to be fired because obviously it was a terrible season. And then for him to go out there and be like, hey, no coaching changes. Well, it's not really your call. You don't own the team. And so everybody's like, okay, Cower's getting fired. Like he knows he's getting fired. That's why he's coming out and saying this stuff. But instead, Dan Rooney issues a statement on January 12th saying that Cower and the coaching staff will be retained. And then 2 days later, the team announces that Tom Donahoe has, quote unquote, resigned. Kind of probably the same way that Bruce Arians retired, right? So, Art Rooney II says, when he looks back on it, he said, quote, in our discussions, we said, this isn't working. We've got to do something about it. Both men said, if I'm the problem, I'll resign. They both felt it was a problem, and the only solution was for one of them to leave. And then in the end, we felt that way too. And they felt that
Yeah,
Donovan
that was
was
that was that was a tough decision by Dan Rooney, and it did pay off. It did pay off in a Super
it
Bowl.
did, and it was tough because again, Dono had built this great team.
He'd
And
been there for
honestly,
13 years, been with the company for 13 years. So
yeah,
no
exactly.
shit. Yeah.
Donahoe says years later, quote, they made a decision. I didn't think it was a fair decision, but it's water under the dam and we've all moved on. I owe a lot to Mr. Rooney, our junior
Everybody,
Dan.
it's kind of, this is like a happy ending. Like it really is a happy ending to this story. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
So
everybody ends up winning a Super Bowl that's involved with this. So
that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the end of the 1990s and the end of the Tom Donahoe era. As Steve alluded to, the Steelers hire Kevin Colbert. And if you want to know how that worked out, check our episode we did on Colbert's tenure, which ironically also kind of follows a similar cycle, just over the course of 20 years instead of 10 years. It starts out with, the team isn't very good, but they have some key pieces from the previous era that the general manager is able to build on and turn into a contender. But then by the end, he's basically back to mediocrity. And I wonder if the Omar Khan era maybe is starting down the same path as his two predecessors, but it's obviously way too early to say that. But as Steve mentioned, Colbert wins. He builds off of some of those later Donahoe draft picks, and he wins 2 Super Bowls. Donahoe becomes a general manager of the Bills, and then later goes to work in the front office of the Eagles, not as a general manager, but he's still in their front office when they win a Super Bowl, so he gets a Super Bowl ring as well. I don't know, Steve. It was just time for him to go, I guess. It was the right decision, I think.
if hindsight's 2020, it seemed to work out for everybody. So it is one of the few times we can say it really did work out for everybody involved. Although, like, it looked bad for Donahoe. Like, at the end, he built a kind of a competitive team in Buffalo, and then it all fell apart. I mean, they never made the playoffs, but I think what ended, like, the Steelers kind of ended him up there, like when that 2005 season they lost with the third string players, but that Steeler team was really good, and Buffalo wasn't bad, and then he just never could get them into the playoffs. But then he went to the Eagles, and he does something with their scouting or front office, so I don't think it's just a token job. So
Right.
and they won a Super Bowl with Nick Foles, and hey, I think he's retired now. I think Donahoe's officially retired.
He is, and I believe still living in the Pittsburgh area. So
good for him. I mean, hey, it's just, sometimes it just doesn't work out at one place, but worked out for Cowher too. Cowher ended up getting the Super Bowl, and like I said, everybody kind of comes out a winner in this one. So,
and
look
do you agree that he and Colbert kind of had the same arc? Just again, they both
I don't
started.
know yet. Like I think Colbert was in a different situation than Donahoe. Donahoe, they never won anything. Like, he wasn't like just trying to hang on to these veterans and get one more out of them. Whereas I think at the end of Colbert's, it was like, okay, we still got Ben. We're just trying to get one more for Ben. I think the worst thing that happened was they didn't win one more for Ben. If it would have been this one's for Ben, like with, Art Rooney, the second saying that, then I think the Steelers would have reset, and Colbert maybe goes away and retires too, and then they can have a true rebuild. And I think that set them back a couple years, is trying to do this win one for Ben thing. And I mean, we've been talking the current state, I don't know. It seems like this is more of a win one for Tomlin kind of thing now.
Yeah, I mean, the current state, again, it's way too early to say where that's going to go, but definitely, like, the end of Colbert, you're right, that is a difference where Colbert had a different motivation at the end of his tenure than Donahoe had.
Donahoe was just trying to get back to respectability there at the end.
Yeah, but I think they also, both guys, like, they it was like everything they touched was gold early. You had Colbert trades up for Troy Polamalu. He drafts Ben. He drafts, he gets guys off the scrap heap like James Harrison, right? And that was similar to Donahoe, gets Thigpen off the scrap heap and drafts Kirkland and Searcy and Chad Brown, all these guys that were key. But then by the end of it, it's like, man, you're drafting these terrible right tackles in Troy Edwards and Scott Shields. And then by the end of Colbert, he's drafting Devin Bush and other guys that didn't work out. So
Yeah.
at least in that regards, it's just, it's like whatever magic they had just wasn't there anymore. And maybe, I don't know, maybe it's just time to leave after a while when that happens.
Yeah, I guess every job has its ebbs and flows, and sometimes knowing when to leave is the key. So.
Yeah, got to walk away from the blackjack table while you're still up a few hands. Yeah.
So.
I
think Bill Belichick found that out the hard way.
Yeah, that's another. Yeah, that's another good example for sure. Coming back to the Patriots. So yeah, that's the Tom Donahoe era. Again, had its highs, and then had its lows, and kind of went full circle back to where almost where it started with, the Steelers being mediocre again, but definitely some good times and some good moves. And Tom Donahoe, I really, I think he'll be fondly remembered in Steeler history. Steve, what do you think?
I think, he's obviously a solid, upstanding citizen. Never did anything that was, I don't hear anything weird like about him, except for he just never could quite find that quarterback to get him over the top. I think that was another problem, is they had Cordell, and Cordell was kind of like a quarterback that was good enough to get you. I think at the end of the Cordell episode, we said that he was good enough to get you to the championship game, but he was not quite good enough to get you over the hump for whatever reason, whether that was just due to his talent or the way the NFL was played back then, or they just didn't quite have another complementing piece to help him out. Whatever way you want to put that, it just seems like those 90s team were like one great player away. Like they just needed another great player on offense to help them overcome, whatever. They didn't have Ben Roethlisberger. That's all I can say, is they didn't win anything until Ben showed up. So
yeah, Tom Donahoe's legacy is very different if Neil O'Donnell doesn't throw that interception, or if Cordell Stewart's able to continue kind of his first season trajectory, right? So you're right. With a in the end, it all does come down to quarterback. So,
I mean, if he keeps Neil, do they win a Super Bowl? I mean, let's say they dish out the big bucks. Do they win a Super Bowl? I don't know. I don't know that who won. You look at the quarterbacks who won. It was Brett Favre, John Elway. I mean, the last guy was like, who's the guy for Tampa? Brad Johnson, Trent Dilfer. Maybe. I mean, could Neil O'Donnell been as good as those guys? Maybe. Who 9-99? Kurt Warner. You're talking I just named like 3 Hall of Fame quarterbacks.
Right. Yeah. No, that's fair. That's a good point. And again, one of those what ifs, we'll never know.
Like the other, I'm trying to think of non Hall of Fame quarterbacks that won the Super Bowl. Brad, the guy from Tampa, what was his name? Brad Johnson. Yeah, and then I don't know who else. That was not Kerry Collins. He lost. Trent Dilfer. That's the only 2 guys I can really think of.
I mean, you could also then you could get in another what if branch of, okay, they let O'Donnell go, but they put that money towards Leon Searcy, right? And then they don't waste all these draft picks on right tackles the next 4 years.
Maybe they pick up another quarterback somewhere that's unexpected, or
a wide receiver that they badly needed, right? So it's like again, wasting 4 day 1, day 2 picks on right tackles.
Well, you could miss. That's where I think it holds true now with this Steeler. You can miss on a first round draft pick here and there, but the Steelers are entering that territory now where they've missed on a couple of first round draft picks.
And it catches up a few years later.
Between Pickett and Harris. Nothing against Najee Harris, but he's not performing like a number 1 pick, and that hurts. That hurts.
So yeah, it's just interesting to look back on that and see kind of the trend. But again, I love that. I still love that era of Steelers football. All right. It's just
it's the
era.
one we grew up watching. It's one we matriculated to. So
right. All right, folks. Well, thank you so much for listening. Please check us out on social media. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. Please send us an email. Let us know what kind of topics you'd like us to see us cover in the future. And once again, thank you so much for your support of our little show here, and we'll see you next time.